When it comes to West civilization, especially England and America, let's conclude that these people continue to hide from themselves even and from everyone else uh, the true nature of their creation, which is highly depending on immigrants. That is not just America, is new continent or new nation, but that was very much Britannia as well. That or rather England, which is not native platform. England is very similar as America, created very much based on the ground of immigrants. And in case of England, obviously, a very special group of immigrants because we talk about monarchy with more specifically defined identity. Something that I talk about for a longer period of time, especially when it is England in question. That is, the concept of England actually depends on very specific immigrants to the extent that it is important for England to continue to be England. This is very straightforward. What's happening here that a territory simply does not want to accept to open its eyes uh, and think in its terms and thinks in terms in how it should be thinking. But major problem of America and England are not just immigrants, but not recognizing what kind of immigrants we are talking, and also not recognizing, over relying on a ready-made population and continuing not to be its own matrix or not to become its own matrix that is going to build and take care of its own population rather than to import it all of the time. And I'm also going to think that America and England are not being constructed, I'm afraid, as a matrix territories, as its own national matrices. And that is why they don't know how to maintain their national integrity and national identity. Because they simply don't know how or are not aware of such kind of functioning. Um, which it might be phenomena of the rest of the Western Europe as well, because these territories actually are emerging out of immigrants initially at the initial point, to the extent that they never stopped and created its own national identity. It was somehow as echoing of the previous consciousness. They do not reproduce anymore. Unlike when you are on our territories, for example, here, hopefully, although obviously it turns to be it's not that easy on our domestic territories as well. Speaking, for example, of South East Europe, it is equally not turned to be not that much of a automatic reaction rebuilding a nation. They also have been found much more uh, excavating its roots rather than building a nation. So it is a question, is it that Europe does have its own matrix, or Europe exists on parameters of depending on immigrants? To the extent that I am born in Southeast Europe, there is a little chance that we believe that there is eventually possibility that Europe can rely on its own matrix if wise enough to search for it and if wise enough to recalibrate on it, which is not exactly happening. People are, when it is in question, living on the territories, in a nation, much more focused, much more existing as a consumer of it, as it is everything sliding from a sky, and it is going to indefinitely slide from the sky. But it's not exactly happening like that. I'm going to notice that people living in nations continue to be much more over relaxed in expecting that nation to continue to exist in its self formation while doing nothing about it, but continuing to consume, consume, and consume. And when they have family, they continue to divorce, divorce, and divorce. That is consuming even a marriage, consuming even a family, consuming family, consuming society. It is all on the side of expecting things to work for you and things to happen for you rather than you bringing to life, bringing to that family, and bringing to that nation. European nations are soaking in immigrants because they are not nation aware and they're not nation focused. They have been until recently America focused. And now we are all wondering, well, why everything is going in America? Well, because everything wanted to go in America. Remember last century. Everything is about America and being in America and about being part of America. And now all of a sudden we don't have Europe. Yes, because Europe somehow continued in America. Well, you cannot have it both. You cannot have it both. Because now when you started investing in China, and now you want to have America as well. Well, you cannot have it both. It is, of course, drying out. America is drying out today in a very similar way how Europe was drying out. Because everyone wanted to be in America. Now everyone wanted to be in China. In second half of last century. And solid beginning of this century. Everyone wanted to be in China. And everyone went in China. I remember even my high school friends, one that had been more kind of in business prone. They started to talk China, China, China. Everyone in eighties, anyone that was much more business savvy started to talk about China. What you expect? What you expect? No Mother Mary is going to keep you the rest of the world. You are adventurous. Well, you have to live up to consequences of this kind of adventure. But this is not living with a nation or living even within a family. This is about being adventurous. And that is what human has not stopped being. That is what human was from earlier times, and that's what human continues to be. And if human wants to make a home, then human should start thinking differently. But our human still does not think still about making home. Or making a nation for that matter. Because that is not how you think when you think about making a nation. You don't think solo player. I, how, for example, in our territories, people have been thinking after war. It was all focused on building my nation. But our parents, they didn't want to go in foreign countries where they would be invited as professionals. They wouldn't like to go. They were so much patriotic. They wanted to stay in their own country. And we, next generation, never forgive them that because uh, living on the west side was still much more attractive. For new generation, that was more attractive event. Um, but the point was how strong patriotism was in times where nations have been built And when you come to next generation, that is having their eyes open somewhere else because they expect a nation is going to stay there for them, as are the parents, which, by the way, die, don't live forever. Um, we move on, and then we expect nations to be there for us. But in our case scenario, even the nations have not managed to bring that much information that they need the next generation. Somehow, in our post-war build-up of nations, everything started to the first generation and then disappeared on the second generation. Second generation was free to go and do whatever they want. It is more like it takes to have a war in order to create a strong nation. And then it lasts one generation, then it disappears. There is no, it developed enough of interest, of sentiment, of national sentiment. Of course, I'm talking here about some kind of critical momentum. Critical mass means critical mass required to maintain a nation. If you lose that critical mass, you lose a nation. If you lose the critical mass, you lose a nation. To the extent that critical mass would end up always being attracted by the higher game field. We talk about phenomena of its own eventfulness, of its own mechanism, of its own movements, which we need to notice and to understand. And what is the consequence on the national identity questions? We have to learn to monitor processes in the societies in correct terms. It's not science fiction. It's a science of society. And you have to monitor event so you can understand the event, and then you talk about it. You don't talk before you monitor and you understand it. Then you talk, not before. What kind of nation you want to talk about when you're all over the place? And the one that stay, that's the phenomena I'm going to notice here. The one that stay, it's like don't give a damn. They're worse than the one that left. The one that left, by a definition, continue to be bigger nationalists than the one that stay. The one that stay continue not to give a damn about the nation. Here it is. I'm minding the mind of that nation, being immigrant for 25 years. I'm minding it more than any single being living in that nation. I'm minding it 10 times more than anyone living there, trying to rather do exactly what I have done. Get out of there, or get closer to getting out of there. That is especially happening where nations continue to be much more in isolation, or have chosen, or have been targeted, have been marked, crossed as the one to be isolated, which means that they would be used as a resource base. There is no accident here. Nothing is accident in international politics. If you have been marked as a regime country, that means that you are targeted as a resource territory. End of discussion. End of discussion. Now, the question is it not that we might need to think differently? That we stopped marking certain nations as regimes on which then the other first half totally become dependent, and they end up calling it drugs and blah 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 and blah 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 and blah blah blah. No, it's not drugs, it's called immigrants. They're going to take at some point of time your country, and then it's not going to be that much of a fan of anything. And why they would not? What happened to Britannia? What happened with England? What happened with England? What on earth? You think you're going to return out of it? No, you will not. Why? Because you have become dependent. No, you call it drugs now. No, you call it drugs now! But you will never get out of England because you have become dependent on England. And England is what England is. It takes what it takes to be England. And that is the stacking momentum. And it's not a drug anymore. It's a skin. You can't lose it anymore. It's a body. You can't afford not to be anymore. It's not a drug. It is to be or not to be. And at some critical point is going to be I coming from that land here and saying, you are not enough for me. And when you reach that critical momentum, then you learn entire of your history, you know, in as that much of a time as you needed to get that information. And you learn your real true history. And you cannot return from it. Because today I have said, you are not enough for me. It's not other way around. Critical point here of Englishness has happened. You are not enough for me. England. I'm not going to deliver this kind of work from the street level of anything. The Ark of Covenant was walking in Britannia. It walked in there. You can't reverse the history. You're going to live by it. The Ark of Covenant went in Britannia. Why you're not living by it? Well, it went from somewhere to somewhere. Why you are not living by it? And why you would have been accepting it if you do not live by it? Now that's Irish. That's enough of Jewish question, as it is now strongly English question and accordingly British question, because at some point of time it has become Great Britannia, not Great England, Great Britannia, with New Zealand and Australia available to Irish population and Scottish population as much as for English population. As I can see here in Australia and New Zealand, there is plenty of Irish that live equal as English people. Absolutely equal as English people. No, Irish people here are not run over by English people. Maoris are not run over by English people. Or you want to tell me they are actually? Seriously? You gave me just one single example out there. It could have been just a nice theatrical performance. Or Scottish people. Scottish people today can raise money to make their own movies. We can't. We can't make our own movies about Yugoslavia. Our movie directors make movies about Yugoslavia as it is the worst place on the planet. This is the most ancient territory of the entire European plateau. And they make a garbage movie about that territory, that Yugoslavia, as it is the ugliest movies made about that territory, the movies made about our territories. At least you can afford to make beautiful movies, but by your own people on your own territory. We can't do that as well. I came here and I was kicked out from my working place with two little kids, as we don't even matter. As we are the last of the last of the last. I'm bringing the matrix of your entire Britishness all the way to America and Canada. You're going to talk to me. I'm the last of the last of the lasts. No, I'm not going to talk about your Irishness here before I talk about my Englishness here. As it starts from there, from the source. I'm not going to drive to read England from your rotten children. I just was talking about what happens to first generation of immigrants here. They become someone else. And now you're going to bring that against me? No, I'm bringing it against you. All together, entire package. Entire package. Immigrants and you on the backyards. All together. Against the territories. As I'm saying, you're not enough for me! To both of you! To the land itself! You're not enough! To declare that history. This work is out of the building. Your building is down! Verdict for today! Ancient Macedonia. Also, no one talks about ancient Macedonia as a region. Macedonia. No one talks about Macedonia as a region that emerged from the concept of ancient Macedonia, and that entire history also does not have exactly clear beginning, which means that ancient Macedonia actually emerges out of its previous history, which was history of Olymp. And history of Olymp was very much planetary protocol. No one talks about it. No one talks about it. No one talks about real Olymp. In the way how we find Olympic Games here, in the way how we find a round table. No one talks that round table and King Arthur, that is Queen Olympia, would start somewhere else. Would start at the point where Olympic Games, well, you cannot have Olympic Games if you would not have similar political setting. Similar political setting. Why you still call them Olympic Games? Why you still call them Olympic Games? Why you still are calling them Olympic Games? Well, excuse me, that is where the entire history of that region begins, including the politics. That is where it is the birth of a Macedonian ancient state. And if we do not understand that, we will never understand the concept of Macedonia and that mega flag. Because Macedonia does have a mega flag. People in Macedonia today are not mega. They don't think mega. They're dogs working for international capitals. The entire political stage of Macedonia is political stage is dog level. It's more like one would call it Orion. Well, it is rather dog level. You don't have their matrix state platform. No one talk there about matrix state platform. No one talks there about the state. They talk about sharing the state or sharing the pie. The pie is Olymp. No, that's not theirs. That is what they found there. The Olymp. They found Olymp there. Olymp of Earth. They're not even mega. They don't even know what that is. Well, they declare the flag. That theirs is not because they don't bring that identity. Excuse me, guys. You don't bring the identity of the flag. Well, don't call yourself a politician of that nation. You're intruder, not a politician of that nation. You're actually attacking that nation. You're the enemy of that nation. Which, by the way, is not being declared. There is just some kind of a socialism chunk of it, which is, of course, totally a strange element of the entire nation, of the entire idea of that nation. And, of course, it is some kind of recruited foreign pipe, oil pipe, for piping that region altogether. And it cannot technically and possibly be theoretically anything else. Theoretically, it cannot be anything else. Because it was part of Yugoslavia. And then it's re-emerging out of Yugoslavia. These people are being born in that country, educated in that country, growing in that country. They're breathing, the air they breathe in that country is air of that Yugoslavia, which has not stopped being there, piping the region, and them being used as a pipe because they do not have any other alternative. Neither they have capacity to deliver any other alternative. Neither they have a region where they can deliver that, because that was a regional platform. That was not a corner of the region platform. That was full scope region platform. Neither they have that grasp, neither they have that intelligence, neither they have that capacity to become what they have happened to be in a historic consequence of consequent events that have been violated at the initial point of time. They cannot even restore them. They cannot even mentally restore them as a memory, let aside to deliver the platform again. I mean, you can't restore something if you don't even depict it properly. We still have problem to depict the early beginnings of that region, because someone brought also Atlantis there all of a sudden and completely cover up the history of Olymp. Now, the history of Atlantis is much more vivid than the history of Olymp. We don't have history of Olymp anymore, but we certainly have Atlantis there for some peculiar reason, and all of the NATO sitting there for some peculiar reason. For God's sake, if you want Nordic defense protocol, build Nordic defense protocol. Why on earth you need to interfere with our Mediterranean defense protocol? If I'm not Mediterranean defense protocol, you're not going to be good enough as a Nordic either. If I don't do my work, you're not going to do yours as well. But you don't defend yourself on my land. I defend myself on my land. And by defending myself on my land, you get defended in the consequence. That's natural law of territories. You're not going to mind your defense protocol on my land, because you don't give them about it. And because you don't give them about it, you're not defending it. You don't defend that land, you end up not being defended yourself. But if I'm the more critical zone, I'm the one asking for your help, not other way around. not other way around. Because who on earth says you a couple of fjords out there to be defended for the entire Europe being employed to defend a couple of your fjords? Well, doesn't make any logic. Doesn't make it would rather be I employed your fjords to defend the entire body of Europe. It would make much more sense. As once upon a time, that is exactly how it was. I employ your fjords to defend my continent of Europe. And then you get your territory as well. And you remember it as well. That's your lecture in defense. You cannot clean territories from capacity to defend, to be themselves and defend themselves, to exist themselves on their own land. You destroy the mechanism of existing on these territories. You make it open ground, and then it's all coming all up to your fjords. Yes, of course, because the planet is much bigger than few of your fjords. Then NATOs are not going to help you. You bloody fools! You bloody fools! You bloody fools! And since when the foolies are going to define me a continent? Since when? Can you please answer the question? Can you answer the question? Since when the fool is going to defend me a continent? Now you, Island of Ark of Covenant, are you sucking it up correctly now? Into full size? By sitting in the center of Europe? Now what that Irish chair in Europe, what is that supposed to mean? Ireland! Answer it! The chair in the center of Europe, what that was supposed to mean exactly? Ireland to answer the question. What I said to fjords is equally relevant for you as well. I call you when I need your help, not other way around. Not other way around. Macedonia of illusions. Are we clear how much you are not Macedonia? Because you don't have a damn clue what on earth that even is. I understand that is the biggest fight today among Russians and Americans, who is going to take control over and Chinese, for example, for that matter. And now Russians got with BRICS in the race over the center of the planet. They're racing who is going to have control over the center of the planet. Instead of the planet to get control over the territories of the planet wants to get control over the center of Earth. Now, can someone explain how we should understand this phenomenon? Should we understand it as a couple of extraterrestrial civilizations are actually controlling the planet, in which case the peripheral territories are going to be rather restricted than given permission to be present on our territories? Yes, I have said restricted. For all of the reasons we need to restrict such presences on the planet. And if we need to manage the planet versus the entire universe, then the Star Trek defined as we speak at the central plateau and against the peripheral territories, if we need to go that far. Which means I have a right to use the planetary rocket system. I have said planetary rocket system versus any of the nations of the planet, if needed. If they appear to act against planetary interests. Notice I'm using here planetary interest, which you can't hear exactly in the charters of United Nations, and I wonder why you can't hear in the charters of United Nations concept as a planetary interest, but you can hear it when you watch television. When you watch Star Trek or Star Wars, we can talk about planetary events, but when we are going in UN, then we don't. Excuse me? Star Trek defined center of Earth. Verdict for today.